Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm grateful you're here with me today as I talk about the board games that I played in August 2024. But I do need to apologize to you because once again, this video is almost certainly going to be a month late. I imagine by the time it gets released, it's going to be October. And I've just been having a really tough time keeping up with my videos this year. First, there was all the health issues I had in the spring that culminated in my 6-day hospital stay. And then almost as soon as I was released from the hospital, I had to get right on top of the mortgage situation in an effort to save my house. So the past 4 months I've been working hard on what has been a very difficult and stressful situation. However, I am very happy to say that I am now kind of wrapping that up. Everything ended up working out, even though the first couple of attempts I was denied due to my low income, but I did finally find a financial institution that would take me on with my mortgage. So I'm very, very happy about that. That's finally going to be finished up in the very near future, and I can kind of focus on other things now. So hopefully I can catch up on my videos in the near future if life doesn't throw anything else my way. As for what I'm going to be talking about today, I played 11 unique games in the month of August, so it was another good gaming month. None of those were new to me, although there was one big main event of the month game that was a new addition to me that had the potential to be a new 10 out of 10 game, depending on how the play went and what I thought of the game, obviously. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'll keep it as a surprise for later. So even though I don't talk about brand new games, the hot newness, every single month that I come to you talking about games, I would say that the one advantage of what I do talk about here is that I get to play the same games over multiple plays, and I get to talk about how my experience with these games changes over time and whether or not my corresponding rating is affected over time. So yeah, I'm not one of those people who will play the hot new game one time, come to you with a quick review, then move on to the next hot new game, but you do get to see me spending time with games and how things are adjusted over time. So hopefully that's of some value to you. I'm glad you're here regardless. Let's get right into it. As usual, I'll go through these 11 games in order of my lowest rated game to my highest rated game. And one reason I did get a decent amount of gaming done this month was because there were a few days where I had 8 people in this house. I had myself, my 2 kids, one of my brothers, his girlfriend, her kid, my brother's 2 kids. So there was a bunch of people hanging out here, and we spent a lot of fun time gaming together, so that was pretty awesome. The first game on this list is one of the games we played together, and this is One Night Ultimate Supervillains, a game that I received in our Christmas gift exchange last December. Now, this is one of these social deduction games, very much styled after games like Werewolf or Mafia, that sort of thing. We played this first with 6 players and then with 7 initially. I've talked about before how social deduction games just aren't my thing at all. I have no interest in trying to convince other people of that what I am saying is true or not, and you know, it's just not my style of game. However, it was just really fun to sit around a table with loved ones and have a laugh together. I will say that the one night versions of these games do make it nice and quick and easy to get through a game, so it's not a really long drawn out affair. Just in terms of my own personal tastes, I do rate the game 4.5 out of 10, which is obviously a fairly low rating, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the amount of fun I had playing this game with my family, because it was a really fun experience. I did enjoy that time, and I'm glad we got to do it. Next up, we have a game that is one of Wyatt's, I think, top 2 games of all time, and this is Castle Panic. So Wyatt asked me to play it with him again. It's a cooperative castle defense game where players are working together to try to prevent these hordes of monsters coming in and destroying your castle. I just played this 2-player with Wyatt, and Wyatt had set up a fairly difficult game for us by mixing in several of the tough Wizard's Tower expansion monsters. However, he also introduced a couple of little house rules in terms of liberal use of the powerful Wizard Wizards cards that we had access to. So we ended up winning the game and enjoying our time together. Wyatt rates this game a perfect 10 out of 10. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. It was a fun little family cooperative game, but if you do what Wyatt did and add tons of monsters, it can really make for kind of a long game. The next one was another one we played with the extended family when they were here, and this was an app-based game that was almost identical to a board game called Spyfall, which is why I'm including it in this list, because it was essentially a slightly simplified version of the game Spyfall with kind of basic yes or no questions. This particular game is kind of social deduction adjacent in that one person doesn't really know what's going on, the other players do, and they're trying to suss out who is the player that doesn't have the same information as the other players. And so a lot of the game is done through talking and communicating and trying to convince people of your guilt, of somebody else's guilt or your own innocence or whatever. However, because of the way this game is designed and set up, I do enjoy it quite a bit more than your standard social deduction games like One Night Ultimate Supervillains. So rating Spyfall as a game, I give it a solid 7 out of 10. It's a fun, kind of larger group experience, and this app, I felt, kind of did improve it by simplifying it a little bit. And then I will add that, speaking of app-style games, we did do kind of this live-action version of the game Among Us, where players had different secret roles. There were murders happening and house gatherings to try to determine what was going on, where each of us physically role-played that part, and we wandered around throughout our whole house here, and every so often somebody would drop dead and we'd have to all gather and figure out what was going on. So just as kind of a side point, we played a lot of this live action Among Us while the group was here, and we had a lot of fun doing so. Now, just with my two boys, we got back to the Adventures of Robin Hood and finished the final Friar Tuck in Danger scenario. So this expansion that we had added to the Adventures of Robin Hood had added 4 new scenarios, and this was the final one in the expansion. What I ultimately realized was this expansion kind of makes the game a little bit worse, because it adds a whole new expansion board that is added onto the main board so that the map you work on becomes much bigger. But that also means that a lot of your turns are just basically moving your figure from one location to another and just traveling from location to location. So there's a lot of time in between doing the interesting stuff where all you're doing is traveling. It also makes the game more difficult because your time is limited. So when you have a lot of time spent traveling, you're kind of eating into the limited amount of time you have to complete your objectives, and overall it just made the game a little bit less interesting, unfortunately. Beyond that, it didn't really add anything else really all that unique to the game, I don't think. It was sort of more just run around, explore, hope you found the right things at the right times, hope you got lucky drawing discs and cubes out of the bag when you had conflicts with other characters and that sort of thing. So while the game is a really fun family game experience, I would say that what we ultimately ended up doing the more we played the game was essentially throwing pretty much all the hourglasses into the timer thing, so we had a huge amount of time to get through this scenario. Kind of added more positive cubes to the bag so that when we had to get into conflicts, we reduced the chance that our character would be captured and taken out of action for a while. Essentially just made it easier for us to just go through the scenario, experience what we wanted to experience, and finish it up. Because the one time we did fail and had to restart, it was kind of frustrating because we had spent all this time discovering certain information, and then we essentially had to reset everything, go through it again knowing what we knew, and just do it a little bit quicker. And it's more of an experience kind of play than it is a win the game type of play, if that makes sense. It's very narrative based, and it's just a game of exploration and walking around seeing what happens. So anyways, the base game I think I had rated 8 out of 10. The expansion itself, I dropped that to more of a 7 out of 10. Evan had previously rated The Adventures of Robin Hood 9.9 out of 10, so almost perfect 10. When I asked him after finishing the expansion what he thought of the game, he said it was more of a 9 out of 10, whereas Wyatt was the opposite. He started at a 9 out of 10 for the base game and ended up feeling it was more of a 9.9 out of 10 by the time we had finished it all up. So yeah, definitely one of Wyatt's favorite games there. Another cooperative game that I ended up playing with my son Evan, and my nephew was Pandemic Fall of Rome. So with our nephew here, we got to pull out a couple of games and try them 3-player with myself and with Evan. And so, this is a game that is above a beginner level game. It's kind of a midweight game in terms of its complexity and what's going on in the game, but both my son and my nephew picked it up really well. We had a great time, and we ended up, for some reason, winning fairly easily. But I shouldn't say for some reason, because I set up the game on easy mode. I reduced the amount of they're not outbreak cards in this version of Pandemic. They're something else that I can't recall now. And I added a few more of the special helpful cards into the deck. So once again, I stacked the game to make it relatively easy, because it was both of their first time playing it. And so it ended up being quite an easy victory. But we all had fun with it. I rate Pandemic Fall of Rome 7.5 out of 10. When I have played it in the past with Paul, he had rated it 8 out of 10, and Evan, as his first experience playing it, rates it a 9 out of 10, so it ended up being a hit with Evan. The next one is one where I met with my Magic the Gathering playing friend, and we ended up chatting a lot and getting just one game of Magic in, where I took a couple of my newer Lord of the Rings decks that I had a ton of fun building, and ultimately the combined forces of Gondor and Rohan in my deck took down Saruman and his minions, who were being played by my friend. I've had so much fun building these Lord of the Rings themes decks. It's definitely revitalized my interest in Magic. And speaking of Lord of the Rings, I also watched movies 1 and 2 with Wyatt, so we still have to watch the third movie, but we had fun watching those two together. Back to our big group event with my brother and all the nieces and nephews and friends and so forth. We played Just One, a really simple kind of word-based party game. What's cool about it is it's a cooperative game. We're all working together to try to guess a particular word, and we did fantastic on the first round using my custom scoring method, which involves just a little bit of very basic math, but it's a more interesting scoring method than comes in the game. We scored a very high A-, which was great, and then on our second round of play we did okay. We only scored a C that time, but it was a hit. Everybody seemed to enjoy it. I scored Just One an 8 out of 10. When I asked my kids about it, Evan said he gives it an 8 out of 10 and Wyatt a 7 out of 10. Now next up was the big event of the month, and this was Clash of Cultures Monumental Edition, which is a version 2.0 of the original Clash of Cultures plus the Clash of Cultures Civilizations expansion. Now, I do have a history with this game because I was one of the people who did a little bit of playtesting and developing with the Clash of Cultures Civilization expansion. All of us who were involved with that got to choose a few civs to work on to develop these special abilities for, and I know for sure that I developed the Celts civilization, and I was trying to remember what else I had done, and I couldn't really remember. I might have done the Vikings, and from there my memory just fails me. So it's a game that I have a lot of history with it. I've loved quite a bit. It's definitely my #1 civilization game. And so when they came out with this Monumental Edition, I sold all my original stuff and picked up the updated version. And I have to say, I really like what they've done with the game. For this game, I actually brought it to my younger brother's house and played with a couple of his friends because I have these games on my shelf that are best with, around 4 players. And I don't have enough friends to play a 4-player game, so I said to my younger brother, who has his own little board gaming group, can I bring out one of my big games over and you could find a couple friends to play with us? So yeah, we were able to get this game played with a full 4 players. I did play the full game with the specialized civs. My reason being was that having a civilization with special abilities would help give players a strategic focus early in the game, because playing with kind of a generic civilization, the whole game is wide open. A new player might not know where to start. I was the only experienced player at the table there. All 3 of the other players, my brother and his 2 friends, had never played before, so I was like, hey, if I add in the new civs, they'll at least have some kind of focus based on those special abilities to have a direction to go with their game. In reality, though, that was just an excuse to play with my full game, because I have to admit that adding those civs does add to the information load in a game that has a massive information load. The amount of stuff you have to keep track of from turn to turn is huge, and people are forgetting stuff all the time. So, whether it was a good idea to incorporate that right from the get-go or not, I don't know. But fortunately, all three of these guys were very experienced with playing heavier board games. I would never have done that, obviously, with people who were used to lighter fare. But yeah, it ended up working out okay. Like I said, I do like the minor rules tweaks they made with the Monumental Edition here. I like the fact that my leaders, each of the 4 leaders in the civilizations, were custom painted by my mother, so that's kind of special. But I will say that this game ended up being 7 hours of playtime from start to finish, because with this game you're starting with one little city, one little explorer on one little part of the map, and then from there you're building up this giant civilization with cities and buildings and armies, and you're going out and exploring the world and conquering enemies and developing technologies and doing all this stuff. And so 7 hours ended up being our playtime. So it was an exhausting time. Even though it was super fun, I will say that it felt too long. We played the variable game end condition, where there isn't a specific set number of turns, but when you get to a certain number of turns, you start rolling a die with an increasing chance that you'll roll to end the game. So we did play that way, which I do like to play because it gives some uncertainty as to when it's all going to come to an end. But between the game's biggest challenge of the information load of everything you're trying to keep track of over 7 hours, the amount of energy, that the mental energy required to stay focused, and the physical energy just to sit there in a chair and play this game for 7 hours with the health problems that I have, it was a challenge for me to keep going until the end. So the other thing with this game was it felt, like I said, it felt like it went on a bit too long, because the last turn or so of the game, it felt like most of us had accomplished what we had set out to accomplish, and we were, by the last turn, we were like, well, I'm not exactly sure what to do here at the end, which is not how you want a game to end, really. And so because of that, I was putting forth a suggestion that maybe we could just call the game a little bit early and count up scores. But the great thing is everybody was having so much fun that nobody wanted to end it early. They just wanted to play it out right through to the end, which was great. I thought it was cool. But yeah, between my physical health and my mental health, the stamina required for such a thing is a challenge. In the future, what I would like to do is start players with just a little bit more right from the outset, so that those first couple of turns that involve doing just tiny little actions are a little bit more meaningful, that the snowball can start building up a little bit quicker, and then I would maybe start rolling to see if the game ends a little bit sooner as well, to just condense that playtime a little bit. In terms of final scores, like I said, I was the only experienced player. I've played the game several times. None of the other 3 guys have played it ever before, and I ended up with the lowest score of the game, wildly enough. So I was playing the Carthaginians. I ended up with a victory point score of 44.5 at the end of the game, although I was very happy that I built the Great Library, because what could be better than having a great library? Now, another player named Eric was playing the Phoenicians, and he finished up with a score of 48.5. Another fellow named Andrew was playing the Persians, and he edged out Eric by half a point with 49 victory points. And then my brother, playing as the Romans, crushed us with a score of 52, and he ultimately built 2 wonders, which really helped towards his score. So yeah, playing as the militarily powerful Romans, he just got his resource engine going and just was able to kind of run away with it. 3 points, it doesn't seem like a huge amount, but yeah, he was definitely in the lead, I think, for the majority of the game. Now, like I said, coming into it, I was expecting to rate the game around maybe even a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10 playing this version of it, but by the end of it, something felt a little bit flat. I know that my own board game tastes have changed considerably throughout the years. 20 years ago when I was getting back into hobby board gaming in a big way. 4X games. Explore, exploit, expand, exterminate. So games like this where you are just starting with a small army, building up, conquering other players. This was my favorite genre of game. Nowadays, I mostly don't like that type of game anymore, even though it used to be my very favorite type of game to play. I don't go for these high conflict games nearly as much as I used to, nor do I go for the really long and complex games as much as I did. I think with some small tweaks to, like I said, condense the beginning and end of the game a little bit, I would still rate the game an 8.5 out of 10 as a whole, playing with the full game with this special, unique civilizations. We've been talking about getting together to play it again now that all players are familiar with it, and it'd be nice if that happens. Of course, it's a little bit difficult to get 4 people together to play a 7-hour game. And that's after spending almost an hour getting everything all set up too. So yeah, it's a full day event for sure, but it was really fun. So happy I got to finally pull out this version of the game and give it a try. Next, I was happy to get back to one of my newer favorites, which is Sky Team, a 2-player cooperative game where players are pilots in an aircraft trying to safely land the airplane. I actually got to play with my friend who has been the longest friend in my life. I've been friends with this lady since we were both teenagers, and she lives on the other side of Canada, but she was kind of back in the area, and I had the wonderful experience of getting together with her and catching up a bit, and just we ended up pulling out this game and just sitting out down on some grass outside, and I taught her the game and we played through it, and we actually pulled off a very last second, last turn win as we were landing on the runway. So squeaking out that victory was pretty fun. Then, because the game is available on Board Game Arena, the two of us set up a game to play online together, and we very quickly crashed at high speed into another aircraft that was in our flight path and absolutely died in a giant fireball. But we set up another game and we've been playing through that. We're in the final turn of that game, and I had such a terrible roll for this last round that it looks like we're going to end up failing, unfortunately, on the very final round of the game. I rolled 3 6s and a 5. We used our last reroll token. I re-rolled all 3 of my 6s, and I got 2 more 6s and another 5. So I'm like, oh my god, we're dead. But anyways, it's been fun that even though we don't live in the same geographical area, we can still play together on Board Game Arena, and I continue to have fun with Sky Team. I had rated this game before an 8.5 out of 10, but like I said, with repeated plays, my ratings can change, and in this case, I boosted it up a bit to 9 out of 10, just because it's such a really clever design. In the past, I have played this game with Paul, who rates it 8.5 out of 10. I've played it with Evan, who also rates it 8.5 out of 10, and I've played it with my nephew, Charlie, who rates it 8 out of 10. So pretty much everybody I've played it with has really enjoyed this little 2-player cooperative game. Got back to another game, this time with Evan and my nephew Charlie. We played Planet Unknown. Again, this is kind of a medium weight game in terms of the complexity that I got to pull out with my teenage son and his cousin, and we had a great time. I even managed to extend my losing streak to 8 games with Planet Unknown here, because I had the lowest score again. I am extremely experienced with this game. Neither my son nor my nephew have played this game before, but yep, I had 61 points. Charlie, my nephew, had 68 points, and Evan squeaked out a win over Charlie with 69 points. So continuing to show what an incredibly bad board game player I am. But I rate the game 9 out of 10. When I played it with Paul in the past, he has rated it a perfect 10 out of 10. When I asked Evan for a rating, he said it's a 9.5 out of 10. So again, Planet Unknown, a big hit with Evan, which is really cool. He's definitely getting into these adult level games now and really enjoying them, which is exciting for me. And then the final thing, we got to, this time 4 players with myself, Evan, my brother, and Charlie. We played King Domino Origins. This is a great one to teach casual players because it's a relatively simple game to play. I could have maybe taught them the version of the game where players are just competing for majorities of resource types. Instead, I played kind of the standard game I've been playing with Paul, where the resources can be traded in to purchase victory point tiles and that sort of thing, which is a slightly more complex version of the game. But anyways, Evan came a fairly distant last place with 41 points, although he enjoyed the game enough that he asked to play it again. My brother ended up with 69 points, I ended up with 72, and my nephew Charlie won with 78 points. So yeah, I rate King Domino Origins a 9 out of 10, Paul in the past has rated it 9 out of 10, and Evan gives this one an 8 out of 10. So yes, this was a wonderful month of family gaming, as well as the excitement of getting a big event game to the table. How has your gaming been lately? Have you been playing any new games that you have really enjoyed? Have you purchased anything new that you're excited to play? Or are there any upcoming titles that you're eager about? You know that I love to talk about that stuff, so please get into the comments and let me know. And thank you so much for watching. Cheers. I imagine by the time this video is released, it is going to be August. The snowball can be in contention. Now, like I said, I was expecting to come in exploit, expand, with repeated games. My ratings can change with repeated games. Ultimately, yep,